Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It's Wednesday. I'm your host, James Anderson. We're brought to you, as always, by Underdog Fantasy and Fantrax. And my guest this week is Dylan White, who has been on the show before, but not since he landed with Baseball America. And so big congrats to Dylan. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. Started at the end of January at Baseball America, kind of rolling out their fantasy arm. They want to branch out a bit more. So Jeff and I have been pumping away at Dynasty ranks and all sorts of Dynasty stuff.
Yeah, really, really happy for you. I mean, that's you deserve as big of a platform as you can get, and love the direction Jeff's taken things over at BA and the fantasy side of things. Obviously, you guys have always done fantastic work on the non-fantasy side, but excited to participate in the big thing at the end of the month and hopping on a Baseball America podcast with you tonight. So lots of fun stuff happening over there.
Yes, indeed. The Fantasy Summit. That's the big thing that you're talking about. The BA Fantasy Summit, February 25th.
February 25th. Yes.
All right. I'm obligated to say that. So.
I'm going to be doing a really fun sort of segment with Chris Clegg on sort of how to build a dynasty roster. Really looking forward to that, and really appreciate the invite. So I wanted to have you on to kind of talk just sort of dynasty targets. It is sort of still kind of full on dynasty season for you and I. Obviously, first year player draft season. Have a lot of my, all my first year player draft content is up on the site. I have a first year player draft underway right now on Fantrax, one of our great sponsors. And I was hoping to make that pick during the show, but I don't know if that's going to happen. This is for the Highlander. But you mentioned to me, before when we were kind of planning the show, that you've done some research on kind of the value of high first-year player draft picks from recent history in your dynasty leagues. And I was really interested to kind of see what you uncovered there.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what the value of these first-round picks are worth. Obviously, it's a small sample size. I'm only in like 3 leagues. And I've struggled actually trying to figure out how to present this in a compelling way for the listeners because, you'll hear a lot of names, you'll hear a lot of numbers. But so basically what I did was I took 2020, 2021, 2022, the last 3 FYPDs of my 3 leagues, my 3 main dynasty leagues I'm in. They're 15 teamers, 20 teamers, BA on some, and some are OBP. But I kind of aggregated the picks to figure out what the top 15 is. I just call 15 for the first round. And then I tried to see using Chris Clegg, shout out to Chris Clegg for the ADP, the mock startups that he just did recently, having the ADP. So you can see, hey, how did Spencer Torkelson, who we drafted in 2021 as generally the first pick overall, what's he valued at? And so I kind of tried to figure out what the value of each pick was because they're so different. Like I said, I was struggling with how to present it, but here goes. I'm going to give it a shot. So I think it's important if I list these names just so you can kind of remember the context. So I'm going to read like 45 names here, but I think it might be helpful. If it's not, cut me off. So in 2020, the first picks, my aggregate first 15, the first round were Jason Dominguez, CJ Abrams, Andrew Vaughn, Adley Rutschman, Bobby Witt Jr., Corbin Carroll, obviously great picks there. Riley Green, Eric Pena, JJ Bleday, Hunter Bishop, Maximo Acosta, Robert Poisson, Luis Rodriguez, Greg Jones, and Josh Young. So obviously Adley, Bobby Witt, Corbin Carroll are like top 50 values, top 100 for sure. Andrew Vaughn, CJ Abrams, Jason Dominguez are up there as well, but then there are obviously some busts. I'll get into this later. But so 2021, just to remind you as well, was Spencer Torkelson number 1, Austin Martin number 2, Nick Gonzalez number 3, Wilman Diaz 4, Zach Veen, Ha-Sung Kim, Max Meyer, Garrett Mitchell, Christian Hernandez, Asa Lacy, Emerson Hancock, Carlos Colmenares, Pete Crow Armstrong, Robert Hassel, and then Austin Hendrick. So not as strong a class. At least we didn't draft as strong a class in the first round. And then as your eyes start glazing over, here's 2022. Last year, Seiya Suzuki was number 1 in my leagues. Marcelo Mayer was number 2. Khalil Watson 3. Brady House 4. Jordan Lawler, Henry Davis, Jack Leiter, Colton Cowser, Matt McLean at number 9, Harry Ford at 10, James Triantos, Trey Sweeney, Benny Montgomery, Jackson Jobe, Sal Frelick. So a bit of a mix. It's too early to tell what's happening. So I was trying to figure out how can I look at these and what kind of conclusions can I make. I think the best way I did it was I took the first 6 picks. So that would be 18 picks, and I took the median value of that ADP, because the reason I wanted 6 and I wanted the median is because we did take Rutschman and we did take Bobby Witt and we did take Corbin Carroll, but they were picks 4, 5, and 6 rather than 1, 2, 3. And so I just wanted to kind of jumble saying, are we good at picking in the first 6 picks around? So the median ADP for the top 6 in the last 3 years was 215 to 220 per the Chris Clegg ADPs. So that is like Ketel Marte, Trevor Rogers, kind of giving you an idea that so half of the picks are better than that and half the picks are worse than that. But that's a good kind of idea of what the first 6 picks in an FYPD are worth. The rest, picks 7 through 15, is the median is like outside the top 650. They are basically half of them are not even drafted 2, 3 years later, 1 year later, or some have some value. So again, I don't know what I'm concluding out of this. I do think we are good at picking in the first 6, like the general consensus where most people, focus on the FYPD lists and rankings. We're pretty good. And then it kind of trails off. And this is not to say that anything after pick 15 is bad, because Alek Manoah, George Kirby, there's all sorts of guys that are being picked and are huge values. It's just in that first round where I guess most of the people think the values are like, I think most people would rather have a first round than like a second and a third. I think that's my experience. Maybe it's not worth it unless it's in the first 6. I think that's my conclusion. It's not really a conclusion, but that's kind of my supposition.
Yeah, definitely kind of makes you think. One big challenge obviously with this is that you're not guaranteed the same kind of talent each year, right? Like For sure. You're going to have and you may not know which years are going to be the good years. I think a lot of people think this is one of the good years, kind of like that Witt, Rutschman, Carroll class. But there's also other years where we kind of have a suspicion maybe it's a pitcher heavy class. We might have a suspicion that it's not going to be that great of a year. So it is challenging to sort of, and obviously you mentioned at the top it's tough because you're only working with a small amount of data in terms of amount of leagues, a small amount of data in terms of how far we're going back here. But I think that definitely it checks out that the hit rate on a first year player draft pick in the first round, even you mentioned those hits, but a lot of those were outside of the top 3. Even there's busts inside the top 3. So I mean the bust rate I think in the first round of a first year player draft is higher than a lot of people would care to acknowledge. But that also is your only chance, if we look at like the top, anyone sort of top 20, top 30, top 40, 50 dynasty rankings, a lot of the very best hitters are from the international market, especially at the very top of our dynasty rankings. But the ones that aren't from the international market, in many cases, you had to take them in the top 15 to 20 of a first year player draft. So that might be your only opportunity to get a Bobby Witt or an Adley Rutschman caliber building block in your dynasty league, knowing going in that your odds may be low of getting that player but it is also your only chance of really getting that player unless you trade for them after the fact.
Yeah, I think everything you said there is correct. Like, obviously, it depends on the quality of the class. Like, I went back to 2019. I didn't use it in the analysis because I was only in one league back then. But like the first 5 picks were Yusei Kikuchi, Casey Mize, Trevor Larnach, Jonathan India, Jared Kelenic. And then there's Victor Mesa, there's Xavier Edwards, Joey Bart, Jordan Adams, Grant Levine, Nico Horner, which is pretty good, Nick Madrigal. So, I mean, obviously it depends. I'm kind of cherry picking. I know sometimes that's the best way to quickly rebuild. If you get your Bobby Witts, your Adley Rutschmans, your Corbin Carroll, George Kirby, because you've accumulated picks during a rebuild, like I think it is a way to build. But like you said, you kind of got to be careful. Don't expect that you're gonna restock with 10 top 200 talents 1 year later.
Yeah, and you referenced the ADP that Chris Clegg has over at Dynasty Dugout, his Substack. I think the idea of sort of rebuilding, it's you definitely obviously want to rebuild with young players, but I definitely don't think anyone's rebuild strategy should be, I'm going to get a bunch of 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, many of whom haven't played professionally yet, and that's going to be sort of the focus of my rebuild. What you want to be doing, I think, is focusing on the 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds who are close to the majors, have maybe even debuted already, but maybe didn't have the most amazing results, and they're sort of pre-prime, close to being big league ready or already big league ready. I want a bunch of those guys that I like, that I think can improve their stock. And then, of course, you do want to supplement that in a rebuild with just a big time young talent like a Jackson Holiday or something like that, or Drew Jones. If you can get your hands on them, that's not something you should shy away from if you're rebuilding. But I don't think you want to just have a bunch of teenagers on your roster and say that that's your plan for your rebuild.
100%. I think a common misconception is what you're saying. Just take a lot of young people or get a lot of draft picks or whatever. I think the best way to increase or improve your dynasty team is to get, it's very easy to say, but it's to get assets that increase in value later. So it's exactly like you said, you find the distressed assets, the buy lows, like a Jared Kelenic or even like Dylan Carlson is kind of on that bubble. People who have a chance, whose value is tanked, in quotes, Spencer Torkelson, but who could go up instead of getting a first round pick, or I want to take Jackson Merrill. Like you get these things that have a better chance of increasing in value. Another thing, and this is a Bryan Slack, shout out to Bryan Slack strategy that he always talks about, the up and down the ladder, is teams tend to, if they're rebuilding, they trade all their old guys for young guys. And what that does is it restricts your trading partners, because now all you have are young guys. So you can't trade with the guys who are competing that year, because they don't want your young guys. They want the Max Scherzers or the older guys that could contribute that year. So he talks about this up and down the ladder, which is always, even if it doesn't fit your quote unquote philosophy, if you're rebuilding, you can still trade for older guys. You can still trade for guys whose value will increase that year in season or even for next year, because that opens up your availability of trading partners, because now you can trade with the guys who are competing and guys who are tanking, because you just have more assets that are more popular with your league mates, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you got to obviously factor in if you're an active trader or not.
For sure.
Like if you definitely want to factor that in if you're someone who's constantly wheeling and dealing. But I'm not a very active trader at all in Dynasty, and so I don't really factor that in a ton, because I know that I'm not going to be spending the time trying to flip that veteran while his value has sort of peaked. Like that's just not something I was planning on spending time doing that season. But if that is one of your strengths, obviously that's definitely a good call. And especially if you're someone like Bryan Slack, who might be really good at pinpointing those guys before the season starts. That's certainly an advantage. Do you have any? When's your first year player draft start? Have you done any yet?
My first one is Sunday, and then my my other two are the weekend after. I've done a mock for BA. An article we did was an FYPD mock with some of the staff there, but I have not actually been in the trenches drafting yet.
Nice. The Highlander. We call this the off-season draft. I'm picking 10th, and we're 6 picks in so far, and so this is obviously not. It's not going to be very first-year player draft player heavy at all, really, compared to a lot of dynasty leagues. I think because it is an open universe league, so the only people eligible for this draft were people who were not on rosters at kind of the cutoff date for adding those guys. So the first 6 picks in the Highlander, we'll call it a first-year player draft, even though it is sort of not really that. But Masataka Yoshida was first overall, Jackson Holiday second overall, Zach Neto third overall, Cam Collier fourth overall. Yoshinobu Yamamoto was fifth overall. Again, it is an open universe league. And then Alex Lang was sixth overall. So just a kind of a hodgepodge of players who are available. And I'm up in 4 picks, and I'm hoping for Cooper Jerpy at 10. But I have a bunch of other solid options, but there's my first year player draft update for everyone.
Are you going to talk about Masataka Yoshida later in this podcast?
I was going to let you do that if you wanted to. I talked a decent amount about him last week with Rob Silver. So, and then I did talk about him with Tim McLeod also earlier. So I'll let you bring him up if you want to. But this is this league. It's so it skews towards the big leaguers who are getting playing time, and even more so, like an outfielder in the big leagues who is playing close to every day, like Yoshida projects to, is hard to find in this league. I'm looking at the best outfielders available by just Fantrax as sort of default sorting, and it's Trace Thompson, Kike Hernandez, Adam Frazier, Robbie Grossman. So, you compare Yoshida to those guys, and it's easy to see why Jesse Roche went with him. And he could flip him, he could keep him, but definitely a big gap between him and the next best available big league outfielder. Jackson Holiday was also sort of like the clear best prospect available, but in this league, the guys that are 3-4 years away don't carry as much value because you can lose them in the off-season drafts if you don't protect them. So it's going to be interesting. I am very hitting heavy in this league, so part of the reason I'm looking for Jerpy. And you mentioned like Alek Manoah and George Kirby earlier. That is sort of my favorite type of player to go after in first year player drafts, is the college pitcher who I think has maybe better safety and better upside than maybe people are factoring in. And you could get that guy in a lot of these first year player drafts in the 20s, in the 30s. And so I think that is one of the big values of the first year player draft, is trying to get like a college pitching prospect you really like outside of these sort of premium picks. I think it's a decent sort of area to try to get okay return on your investment. All right. I'm going to head to a quick message from our sponsors, and then Dylan and I are going to go position by position and give you guys some targets, trade targets, startup dynasty targets, but just some dynasty targets that we think are a little undervalued. The fantasy baseball season is underway, and there's no better place to play than Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy baseball. Right now, Underdog has MLB Best Ball tournaments live, including the Dinger, which has $500K in total prizes. In Best Ball, all you do is join a contest, draft your team, and that's it. There are no waivers, no trades, and no in-season management. Draft 20 rounds of players and get the best cumulative scores in your starting lineup. 3 pitchers, 3 infielders, 3 outfielders, and 1 flex each week of the regular season. Getting started is simple. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com, sign up with the promo code RWMLB, and not only will Underdog double your initial deposit up to $100, but you'll also get 6 months of RotoWire subscription for free. Again, that's Underdog Fantasy, promo code RWMLB. Draft your 100K Dinger team today. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your Dynasty, Keeper, Redraft, and Best Ball leagues. So Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. If you're just kind of sick of playing on some outdated site that hasn't updated anything in years and has a really shallow player pool, if you're looking to move your league over to Fantrax, that's easy. The player pool is pretty intense. As I referenced earlier, we've got guys who are still in Japan getting drafted in the Highlander Dynasty Invitational because of how wide their player pool is. It's a great place to have your Dynasty leagues, great place to have your Keeper leagues. The draft room's great, works well on your PC or your phone. I really can't recommend it enough, especially for those Dynasty and Keeper leagues. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, so we're back. We're going to go through position by position, and Dylan and I are going to give some players that we think are undervalued in Dynasty leagues right now. Guys that maybe you want to trade for, guys who we think might slip further than they should if you're doing a Dynasty startup draft. And we will probably have some occasional references to Chris Clegg's Dynasty ADP, which was a lot of fun to help him kind of build that out. I think he did 18 different Dynasty mock drafts to generate that ADP. So a very valuable resource that again is over at his Substack, Dynasty Dugout. So Dylan, we're going to start at the catcher position here. Only one name stood out to me, but I'm still going to let you go first. And if you take him, then I'll just kind of piggyback on whatever you say. But who stands out to you as a maybe undervalued catcher in Dynasty leagues right now?
Surprisingly, my answer is Francisco Alvarez. I know he's well loved, rightly so. Obviously, they're good options, especially in the younger sort of prospect bunch, like Logan O'Hoppe, Andy Rodriguez, Edgar Cuero, that type of thing. Sorry if I said your guy's name. But I think Francisco Alvarez is undervalued. I think I do these prime projections. I did it for BA when we released our fantasy top 100, and he has like a prime projection of like a WRC plus of 130. He has like 30 home run power for 600 plate appearances. Like it's very good. He's very young. He'll be in the majors this year. Maybe he won't be dominating this year, but I have him. If you sort of extrapolate his expected stats over the next 3 years, etc., I have him as like the number 2 value in Dynasty, and especially in OBP, he's actually he's even better. So looking at the Clegg box, he was the 11th catcher taken, and since I have him second, I think I had to say he's undervalued.
Yeah, either the ADP is way too low, or you're way too high, or
probably that.
Maybe some combination. Yeah, I mean, I definitely buy the peak Francisco Alvarez hitting 30 homers a season at catcher. By that, 100%. Like, I think that's very, very fair projection. How much? What's your projection for his sort of peak OBP and peak batting averages?
I think I don't have it in front of me, but his batting averages are like 260, 265, and the OBP I think was around like 360 in a peak. Sometimes he'll be higher, sometimes he'll be lower, but that's kind of like the centering for when he's like age 27, 28. He'll be around there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I'm 20 points maybe lower, 15 points lower in batting average. It would be my kind of adjustment, I guess, to those projections from Alvarez. I don't know. I know he hits the ball super, super hard, but he's just gonna be one of the worst athletes in the big leagues as soon as he gets there. I mean, he's gonna have to just really be a monster, I think, to hit for that high of a batting average, which is possible. But part of the reason I'm lower on him than most people is I think he's going to be kind of a classic big power, doesn't kill your batting average, doesn't help your batting average type of catcher, and it seems like there's a decent amount of those guys now compared to what there were 5-6 years ago. So that's interesting. I didn't expect you to go with a prospect there, but yeah, you're really high on Alvarez. My pick is, don't have to spend a ton of time on him because I've probably talked about him a decent amount already this offseason, but my pick is Danny Jansen, who I think it was one of the Clegg mocks maybe, but I remember taking like Will Smith. I love in some Dynasty mock I did this offseason. I was just in love with the value I got Will Smith on in my mind, like 6th or 7th round, something like that. But then I remember Danny Jansen went like 20 rounds later or something like that. And I just really regretted taking Smith where I did because of how good of a value I thought Jansen went for. And I don't see any reason why he should have he's got a lower ADP than 8 catching prospects. These are guys that just don't have any kind of a floor, really. You don't know when you're going to be able to count on them for playing time. So they're fine if you're rebuilding, but I can't imagine taking 8 catching prospects over Danny Jansen, who's been just a monster on a per plate appearance basis for, calendar year, more than a calendar year, really. And so the main knock with him is just, well, how many plate appearances are you getting? But I think it's more likely to me that Danny Jansen is not just extremely brittle and will be able to get you, 100 games a year, than it is that there should be 8 catching prospects going ahead of him. So I just think Jansen is you can get him for next to nothing, I think, in a lot of Dynasty leagues right now. And I mean, he's got a lower Dynasty ADP among catchers, like significantly lower than he does a redraft ADP among catchers, and he's not even old. So I think people are really sleeping on Danny Jansen.
Yeah, I think that's an artifact of earlier in the season when the Jays had Gabriel Moreno as an option too. And so who's going to get all the playing time, and especially in the Dynasty, who will get all the playing time is probably Moreno over Jansen long term. And then so ADPs may have reflected that, and that's kind of just a residual artifact of that people are forgetting that, he's going to be, him and Kirk are going to be the 2 main catchers, probably not Varsho. And the Jays really like Danny Jansen's defense, how he calls a game, his contact quality is so good. So yeah, I like that call for sure.
So we'll head over to first base, and there's one guy that I think you might pick as your target. So I will I'm actually not going to say him yet, unless you don't pick him. But I did just want to quickly mention, and this isn't that useful to people, but I think Vlad Guerrero and Pete Alonso are being pretty undervalued, at least according to this ADP. And you're not getting undervalued by dozens of picks when you're going in the top 20, but Vlad Guerrero, his min pick in these 18 mock drafts was 6, and I have him as a top 5 guy for Dynasty. So in none of the 18 leagues did he get valued as a top 5 guy, so I think he is undervalued. And then Alonso, those are the types of guys I want to build with in Dynasty. I like the guys, like the perfect guy to just have for 8 years is if you can kind of get in on Freddie Freeman early or Nolan Arenado early, or just one of those types of guys where it's just monster 4 category production every year, set it and forget it, and then you get your speed a little later. So I think Vlad and Alonso are a little underrated, but that might not be that useful for people listening. But who's your pick?
So probably no surprise, I pick Kyle Manzardo here. I was actually going to say Rowdy Tellez in my article that we dropped on BA. I had him as my target, but I thought that would be, you're too high of a Rowdy guy, so I didn't want to be too nice. So I went with Manzardo. Obviously, when I was on before, I talk about him. Really like the skills, the StatCast stuff, all that. I just think recently he's actually had some cold water poured on him. Some of these prospect lists have dropped him down. Like I have him like top 20, just to be conservative. And some of these lists have him in like the back half of the hundreds. And I think that is kind of shifting the market slightly, the perception. And so I think now's a chance to kind of take advantage of this little dip and grab him. One thing, which I'll be talking about later too, that I've been looking at with StatCast data is how a prospect does against fastballs and then how he does against everything else. I haven't finished my research, but like the premise is like maybe like Kelenic, Adele, these guys, we think they're so great on the surface because they're just crushing fastballs, but they struggle with breaking balls, and it's kind of masked by the sort of the aggregate number. And so I've been looking at sort of the separation of the two. So Manzardo has a better xWOBA against breaking stuff, like non-fastballs, breaking stuff, and changeups. It's like 459 compared to like 430 xWOBA. So like the reason I look at that is like, are there flaws in the hitter's profile that could be exploited by major league pitchers? I don't see flaws. He barrels up so well. His launch angles are good. When he hits it hard, it's not on the ground. This is obviously in broad strokes. He's not susceptible to the hard fastballs. He's not susceptible to splits, really. He's not susceptible to breaking stuff. So it's just a solid package all around. I know that the Rays have the way they play their roster. There's Aranda, there's Mead, there's all sorts of mouths to feed. So that may obviously cause some hiccups maybe in getting the full-time playing time. But I just really think he's going to transcend that and get at least, 450 or more plate appearances per year. And it's just going to be a solid, like you say, set it and forget it. It may not be like the Freeman and Vlad type numbers, but they're just going to be solid across the board.
Yeah, that's definitely the hope. While you were making those points, I went back and looked at the BA Dynasty mock that we'll be talking about tonight, and I got Manzardo there as just by my quick kind of counting, as the 23rd prospect off the board, pick 157. So. Yeah, I think you're 100% right that there is sort of everyone was loving Manzardo when all the fantasy lists were coming out and he was sort of top 10, top 15. And now the real life lists are coming out and he's ranked where most first base prospects get ranked on those lists, like most good first base prospects. And so I think people are, if you were just sort of drafting Manzardo or valuing Manzardo as by sort of appealing to authority, but you weren't really sold yourself on him, I think people are maybe losing confidence. So that's a great time to try to get a guy in Dynasty if the person rostering them might be sort of questioning whether or not they're as good as they thought they were. So I like that call. My call is actually Josh Naylor, and a guy I've probably talked about a lot this offseason. Just, he kind of he's basically got the same Dynasty ADP as redraft ADP, and I just don't really get it. Like, he's young. I think his best years are ahead of him. I think his team context, lineup context, all great. So, not really sure why people are hesitant to grab Naylor in Dynasty. He was going behind guys like Spencer Torkelson, Ty France, CJ Crone, Josh Bell. I would take Naylor over all those guys very easily. So that's my pick at first base. All right, second base. I've got 3 guys here. I don't feel that strongly about which one I'm going to go with. So again, I'm going to throw it to you first.
So I went with someone who's not yet at second base, not yet eligible. That's Miguel Vargas. It sounds like they're going to work him out there. I like Miguel Vargas. Same thing with the Manzardo talk, that he's kind of dropped down on some of these real life lists. I totally get it. He's not the greatest defensively. There's no real home for him. Will it be left field? Will it be third base? Will it be second base? His exit velocities aren't the greatest, but it's just a solid professional package. He's going to have high batting averages. He's going to have high OBPs. He was already in the majors. He's going to probably hit at the top of the lineup of the Dodgers for a while. Looking at the projections and how those project out, he just kind of looks like Gleyber Torres or Dansby Swanson, like 20 home runs, 10 stolen bases, solid batting average, good counting stats. And then he's younger, obviously, than them. So it's like, if you can get a 23-year-old Gleyber Torres, I think I would take that. So I think he's being underdrafted currently, and so I have him as my target.
Nice, yeah. Love Vargas, and I like that you went with sort of realistic comps there on him to make your point, because I think too often people, say a prospect's ranked 10th or 12th or 15th, someone might compare him to someone like Gleyber Torres, who isn't seen as this crazy high upside guy, and it's sort of that's the case for not drafting them. But to your point, if you can just get all of Gleyber Torres's prime years on your dynasty team, that's awesome. And not every pick has to be a home run.
Yeah, no, exactly. And even Gleyber Torres now is like the 8th second baseman being drafted. So it's not like he's a zero or a nobody. Like, he's a valuable young asset that accumulates production for you. So if you can get in early on that, get it.
Right, exactly. And you've got Vargas ready to help. He can help a contending team or a rebuilding team. So he's someone that should have wide appeal. I'm going to go with sort of a who am I going to go with? All right, I'm just going to go with stay with prospects here. Curtis Mead. How high are you on Curtis Mead, Dylan?
I'm pretty high. Him and Manzardo are actually very close. They have similar everything. So
yeah, and I'm going with Mead at second base. I know in I think in Fantrax he might be third base eligible only. I think he played more at third base than second base in the minors last year, but I expect him to eventually be sort of second base, DH. Just don't know if he's got the arm for third. But really what he is he's a hitter. I don't think he's as bad defensively as Jonathan Aranda. So I think none of the guys that are kind of there are going to stand in his way. And I know people have made sort of really lazy comparisons to sort of past Rays guys who have failed or maybe not produced right away, and their values gone down because of that. But there's mean, there's basically nothing that Curtis Mead and Josh Lowe or Curtis Mead and Vidal Brujan have in common other than just the team they're on. They just don't have similar skills at all, really. So I think Mead is just a very safe hitter. And kind of like we were talking about with Miguel Vargas, Gleyber Torres, is that sort of the comp. Like, if Curtis Mead is just, guy who hits for a pretty high average and hits 20 to 25 homers and doesn't come out of the lineup, maybe that's not a guy who's getting taken in the second round of redraft leagues in his peak years, but I think he could just be a guy who's taken in the top 100 of redraft leagues for his entire prime. And so that's very valuable.
Yeah, on our BA top 100 for fantasy, Jeff convinced me that Mead is actually probably higher than Manzardo, and so we actually have him higher than Manzardo. And I love Manzardo.
that must have been hard for you.
I'm still getting over it.
I mean, it's a nice kind of paradox because the edge Mead has is the ETA. I don't even think Manzardo's a lock to debut this year. I wouldn't be drafting him in draft and hold leagues really, where he's going. But Mead, I do kind of want to see I will be watching Mead here over the next month to kind of see if he's able to throw, if his I think his forearm is fine, because there were some sort of signs towards the end of last year that I think he got an injection in it. So I don't think we're 100% out of the woods with Mead in terms of avoiding sort of something that needs surgery there. But skills wise, I don't really question it. And if he is healthy, he will be up this year. Okay, third base. I'm ready to go first now. And this is a guy who's going very high. But it's someone I'm very confident on that he should be going even higher, and that's Austin Riley. His ADP and Chris Clegg's mock ADP was, what was it, 15th? Yeah, 15th. I think I have him ranked 6th or 7th. I think Austin Riley is just that's as safe as it gets as a building block in Dynasty. He's 3 years younger than Ohtani and Alonso. He's 5 years younger than Judge, J-Ram, and Machado. He's a year younger and in a better lineup than Devers. And I would take him over all those guys. And I know that that's not a common opinion, but I don't think people are properly pricing Riley for Dynasty when you factor in not only how high the floor is, but how high the ceiling is, and the fact that you're getting this guy who, to me, is he's a top 20 player in redraft already, but you're getting probably the best. I mean, you can count last year as one of the best years of his career, but you might be getting 3 of his 4 prime years in these next 3 to 4 years. So I just think Riley, I know he's valued very highly, but I don't think he's valued nearly highly enough.
Yeah, I love Riley too. He crushes every type of pitch as well. Like, it's not just he's a fastball guy and you can get him with breaking stuff down and away or anything like that. It's just everything's crushed. So I always like that.
Great. Love that we're on the same page there. Who's your guy?
So I went with a prospect. I don't have him on any of my rosters, so I'm going to regret bigging him up. But Junior Caminero, he, there's a couple young guys that have appeared on pretty much all the lists that have popped out, like Miguel Blaze, for example. But just Caminero, I've always liked. We loved what Jackson Churio did at low A at the age of 18. Caminero actually had better contact, higher 90th percentile exit velocity, and chased less than Churio, the same age, same level, albeit 117 plate appearances, as opposed to sort of the bulk of the season for Churio. So, I mean, the stuff underneath is there. He's crushing in winter ball right now. He looking at that, how does he do against hard stuff? How does he do against soft stuff? There's not that much of a discrepancy there. He's above the average for both. Just solid exit velocities and contact, everything you want in a hitter. So I pick Caminero.
Yeah, I love Caminero. He's someone I have on. Don't know if I have him on every Dynasty team, but I'm pretty close to that. It's sort of with Caminero. It's sort of how do you value him? Like what caliber of prospect who's maybe a year or two closer to the majors are you trading to get him? I think it's hard to see. This is like why he will fail. It's hard to see a red flag like that with him, but it's just sort of he's far enough away from the majors that something could go wrong. So where do you have him valued just among prospects?
We have him in the top. He's definitely in the top 100. I think he's like 60. And like he easily can be in the top 10 quickly. It's like we're trying to balance like near term and like everything you're saying, like the proximity, what can go wrong. Like his peaks look like 30 home runs, and just like a slugger, like an Austin Riley type guy. So it's just that won't happen for 7 years, whatever. And so what do you value him like you said? So yeah. I really like him. I'm going to mention another guy later too, who's sort of in the same boat.
Yeah, and if you're going to try to make a play for Caminero, make sure it's in a dynasty league that you feel pretty good about the sustainability of it. So shortstop, I had a couple either ors that I wanted to throw at you, and they sort of tie into two guys that I think are undervalued. So first one is, who would you rather have in Dynasty, Anthony Volpe or Jeremy Pena?
I'd say Volpe.
You would?
I think so.
Okay. I'm Pena, and I'd feel really good about it if I could make that trade if I was the Volpe person. But I do think, I don't know if Pena, so with Pena, I don't actually think he's that undervalued by ADP, but I did notice that he was just back to back in Clegg's ADP with Volpe. And to me, that's an awesome opportunity to kind of cash out for a really safe option there. But make the case for Volpe, because I'm being labeled as like a Volpe hater by Yankee fans because I have him ranked 15th. Even though I'm probably higher than most rankings they're comparing my Volpe ranking to on Oswald Peraza. I don't hate the Yankees, but make the case for Volpe over Pena.
Yeah, I think Peraza versus Volpe and Glaber's still there. So that adds some questions about like who's going to survive that, and maybe Volpe won't. His year was a bit down from the year before, but all the underlying was very similar. I still think he's a 2020 guy. I still think he's going to have like 340 OBP minimums, whereas Pena is, like he's at like 300 right now. So I just think this the extra speed that Volpe has. And yeah, I just think Volpe's kind of a solid package. I think he's gonna play. Him and Peraza are gonna play. Glaber may be traded. So I just don't see the risks to Volpe as high as others do. Of course, there is risk. Obviously, Pena is doing it. He did it on the big stage as well. But I just think it's the extra speed and the OBP. I mean, they are. I don't mind that they're back to back, to be honest, in the ADP, because I could see both sides of that argument. I think I lead Volpe.
Yeah, and the OBP factor is definitely big. Like, it's a slam dunk for Pena for me over Volpe in batting average leagues, but Volpe probably has the better long-term OBP, but I do think I think Pena is a very challenging player for projection systems because of his career arc, where a lot of the best work he did was not being recorded statistically because of the pandemic and his injury that caused him to be kind of a late return in 2021. So like if you go back to pre 2021, you have to go back all the way to 2019 when he was an A ball, and he was a great OBP guy in the lower levels, but it was just what are you going to read into that, like a 21-year-old in A ball? So I think Pena might have more upside to kind of improve quickly at some of his deficiencies from last season than might appear in like the projections. But I can buy the OBP Volpe being better there. My other quick question for you was Ezekiel Tovar or Royce Lewis in Dynasty?
I love Tovar. I do think he'll be like a 25-15 guy in Colorado. The good defense as well. Royce's numbers, like his projections and all that, are better, but it's like the easy low-hanging fruit of saying the injury history. I think I'd go Tovar there.
Nice, I love it. We disagree on both of them. I think it's easy call for me, Lewis over Tovar in Dynasty. And I noticed they were back to back in the ADP as well. But we've been delaying your call for who the best value is at shortstop. I've kind of rambled on with my either ors there.
Well, I don't know if this is the best value. I actually struggled with this one because I think Royce Lewis is actually a good value because I think he is being downgraded a lot because of the injury. His projections over a number of years is actually excellent, one of the top 5. So that's a good one. But I went with someone after your heart as well, Eric Brown Jr.
Oh man, wow!
It's just we had him 31st on our FYPD list, so that's back a second round. I don't think he's incredible, but I think he has a very good shot at exceeding that expected production. He's just so athletic. He looks like he can get 30 stolen bases. His contact quality is great. And just the athleticism and the tools will just I feel he has a great shot at really exploding. So yeah, I just went with Eric Brown Jr. I just think I know that he was a popular trendy name after the draft as like someone to get early in FYPDs and stuff. And then I think he's kind of sagged a bit. And I just think that, maybe I should boost him back up again.
Yeah. And that ties right back into our first year player draft conversation from earlier. I mean, that's not a guy that you need to take in the top 15 of your first year player draft. So, I mean, yeah, if you kind of operate, I don't know if you specifically said to do this, but if I were listening, what I would have taken from what you said earlier is, let's say I'm picking 9th or 10th in my first year player draft. Maybe I should look and see if I could turn that into 2 picks in the sort of 20 to 40 range. And if you were to make that type of move, Brown could be an option for one of those picks.
Exactly.
Okay. Outfield target. You go first this time.
Okay, so I will probably regret this too because I have a couple trade offers involving this player in my inbox right now. But probably my favorite prospect right now is Samuel Zavala of the San Diego Padres. So he, like I said, Miguel Blaise and Junior Caminero, Zavala is like the third member of that sort of young guys who are far away but are still in top 100s. I just like everything about him. He last year on RoboScout, he was like the number 1 DSL guy. This year, he was the youngest to be in low A, just a couple weeks after he turned 18. And the way I compared Caminero and Churio, like add Zavala to that, and Zavala is even better. He had higher exit velocities. He's younger. He crushes hard stuff. His soft stuff, he's not as great. I did look at see how he did against like 93 miles an hour or faster or harder, and he didn't have that many opportunities. So it's a small sample size, but he did like Churio just crushes that. So I'm not saying he's better than Churio, but all the underlying is as good as Churio, and he's a year younger. I have him as a 30 home run bat in the corner. He's kind of the Padres' best prospect now, and so they're gonna shepherd him along and kind of curate him to be their next big star in 5 years, 4 years. So yeah, Samuel Zavala is my guy.
Who would you, if you could only acquire one of them this offseason, would you go for Caminero or Zavala?
I think I'd go Zavala.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How is the what's your exit velocity data say on Caminero versus Zavala?
All right, let's see here.
Caminero, I think most people know Caminero's a monster for his age in terms of how hard he hits the ball.
Yeah, his 90th is like 2 standard deviations above the average for the level. That's Caminero. Zavala is a bit lower, but he's a year younger. Mm-hmm. So where are we here? He's about just over average. Half a standard deviation above average. But against breaking stuff and hard stuff. So that thing after my own heart where he crushes everything. Doesn't really have a flaw yet.
All right. I'm going to give one outfielder that I really like who had a top 100 Dynasty dugout ADP, and one who was outside of the top 350. So should I go with the high guy or the low guy first?
Go with the high guy first.
All right, Bryan Reynolds. I think he's a borderline top 50 guy for Dynasty. I just think the skills are really stable. They're gonna trade him at some point. It's gonna be better for him. Just another guy, kind of, he's not on that level of like a Riley or Alonso, like type of guys I'd want to take in the first or second round of a Dynasty startup. But I think getting Reynolds as your second outfielder or even your first outfielder in a Dynasty startup is really solid. You're just giving yourself all the stats, maybe not double-digit steals, but he's going to fill up everything else. And I really think we'll look back on 2022 as a time when you could have actually bought a little low, even though it was a good season for him. And then my super low guy, to nobody's surprise, Jesus Sanchez. But any thoughts on Reynolds or Sanchez?
I like Reynolds a lot. I think he falls into that bucket that we're talking about of just kind of not flashy, but you put him on your roster and you're just generating value for years. And those are sort of the unsung heroes of like championship teams, right? Where you're not getting, it's not the 40 home run guy or whatever that you have to pay through the nose for. It's just this person that's getting 25 home runs, 10 stolen bases, high OBP that just anchors your roster. So I like Bryan Reynolds a lot. I do think he is undervalued in some ways, and I do think he's overvalued in some ways. Jesus Sanchez, I like that call too. Matt Eddy on Twitter yesterday asked who would you take? It was a poll in an OBP league: Austin Hayes, Jesus Sanchez, or Jake Fraley. And I think I still go Jesus Sanchez. I know his OBP isn't that great. Same with Hayes, but he's younger and just the power is so good. I think I would still go Jesus Sanchez. It's a good question. I get the Fraley side too, higher OBP, but he's got platoon split, so it's there's each of them have warts. But I like Jesus Sanchez too. Do you think he's how many plate appearances do you think he'll get this year?
Well, look, and this is sort of where it's almost it's almost useless to sort of project Jesus Sanchez and plug it into your your value generator is like, this is what he's worth because I projected him for this. He's either going to be good or he's going to suck. And if he's good, he's going to play a lot. And if he sucks, he's not going to play a lot. It's just you're taking a big swing on a guy that's got 35 homer power and is young, and no one's going to get in the way of him playing if he's performing. Projecting the plate appearances on him, it's just sort of, is he going to be good? I think there's a better chance that it clicks for him this season than the market is pricing in, I guess, is the way I would phrase that.
So if you're on the clock and you're Highlander FYPD and Cooper Jerpy's there, but also Jesus Sanchez.
Oh man, I would hammer Sanchez. If anyone in the Highlander is listening and has Jesus Sanchez and wants to offer him for my 10th pick here, do that all day long.
I guess it's true. You did say young outfielders that would play would probably go high.
Yeah, I mean the highest default young-ish outfielder in the Fantrax player pool right now is Kyle Isbell, with Cal Mitchell and Nolan Jones coming up behind him. So, okay. Pitchers. Now, this one, I'll be honest, I didn't see a ton of value in the top 50 or so starting pitchers, just because those aren't the type of guys I'm generally going after at cost. I want to acquire my pitchers before they've sort of reached the top of the mountain. So one guy who stood out to me is David Peterson with the Mets. And I think it's just, maybe, and there's some flaws with Dynasty ADP because you have people who are just sort of living in the moment, and a guy like David Peterson maybe doesn't get properly valued in these relative to how he might in a real league with cash on the line. But I just look at that rotation, and someone's going to get hurt at some point, and even if they don't, he might just be one of their 5 best guys at some point. So kind of taking a long view with Peterson and assuming that he's going to be a permanent part of a rotation sooner than later, even if it's not right at the start of the season.
Yeah, I like David Peterson a lot. Same question: would you take him or Cooper Jerpy in that draft?
Oh yeah, I mean, all these are going to go to the big leaguer. Really.
Okay.
I'll do the same exercise and tell you the top starting pitchers available: Cole Irvin, Kyle Freeland, Jordan Lyles. So
yeah, that'd be Peterson.
I'll take Peterson.
I think my problem with Peterson is the leagues I play in has a 7-man bench, and because he's not minors eligible, you kind of have to clog that spot. And if he's in the bullpen, I mean, there are better bullpen options, like middle reliever options that I'd rather play week to week. So it's hard. Just for me, that's just the way I look at him. I totally think he will have a sub-4 ERA if he's in the rotation and is excellent value. I had him a couple times in TGFBI last year. So I do have a soft spot for him. I do think he's good. It's hard to clog up a spot for him unless you have a big bench and you can kind of keep him there.
And before you say your guy, that gets back to sort of the complexities of different dynasty leagues, because there's just different, and there's all kinds of scoring formats people have. Your 7-man benches. I assume there's minors spots and then 7-man benches. But I don't play in leagues like that necessarily, so that didn't factor into my valuation. But I play in other leagues where there's sort of a K over walk component, or just other categories that make a lot of these sort of fringe starting pitchers not that valuable at all. So it is very league dependent, and you listening at home definitely know better than we do how starting pitchers are valued in your league. But All right, I'll turn the floor back over to you. Who's your starting pitcher?
No, but that's a huge point. Same thing where I was talking about the up and down the ladder. Like if you're not a trader who's active or don't have the time to be active, then don't listen to me at all. Like you have to know your league, you have to know your strengths, your weaknesses, your risk profiles, your league mates, their tendencies, all that stuff. So yeah, totally agree. And I apologize that I was kind of focused on my style of league. So my pick, this one's for fellow Highlander Drew Wheeler, ex-colleague at Prospects Live. He's been it's not Jake Eater, it's Ken Waldachuk.
Oh.
So I took him in our BA mock that we're going to be talking about later tonight. I traded for him in another Dynasty league. I think because he's on the A's and is quote unquote not expected to get wins, he gets downgraded, but his projections are excellent. He has like a 24% K rate at age 25, which is the same or higher than Alek Manoah, Julio Urias, Joe Musgrove. Strikeouts are important. Strikeouts are a category. They're also a very good indicator of longevity in the league and ERA. They're correlated. I have him peaking at like a 3.6, 3.7 ERA. So yeah, he may not get wins, but he's going to be like an Erod, Sean Manaea type. Again, one of these sort of like unsung heroes that just give you innings, give you strikeouts, get the occasional win. Like Frankie Montas, like these guys were being drafted. Chris Bassett, even though they're on the Athletics, like they add value. They're not expensive. And I think they're sort of under the radar because their perceived value is they're just like an arm that you throw in the back end of your rotation. But I think he's valuable.
That's interesting because that's the first guy you've said who I'm just not that high on at all. And it's partly the wins, but like I don't think the stuff is as good as his strikeout rates in the minors would lead people to believe. He's actually kind of a classic. The redraft crowd is actually higher on Ken Waldachuk than the Dynasty crowd is because the redraft crowd just looks at the stats and the opportunity and, we're off to the races. But I think a lot of people in Dynasty just know that he kind of came up with, I don't know, the changeup. Like a lot of lefties with good changeups just put up way better numbers in the minors than they can in the majors. And you're not saying that he's going to put up the numbers he did in the minors, but yeah, I'm a little off Waldachuk, but that's interesting. I'll have to take a deeper look at him maybe.
He's got 4 pitches. They all grade out higher than average on my grades. I've seen other pitch models where he's got very high grades as well. So yeah, I take a deeper look there, James.
All right, I will. And that's a great call because you could probably, it might be a great call, but in terms of being able to get a guy for cheap, it's a great call because I think you could get Waldachuk for quite cheap. Okay, relief pitcher. We are going to do relief pitcher quick. I'm just going to throw out a few names. I think Clay Holmes is a guy that I obviously like. That's kind of an upside play. Per Chris's ADP, he was going later than Bednar and Kenley and John Duran, and definitely take him over those guys. I also think poking around a little on Liam Hendriks is something I would consider. Again, this is mock ADP, so there's nothing fun about taking a guy like Liam Hendriks in a mock. But I have no idea if he's actually going to come back and be good, but I think it's more likely than not that he eventually does come back and is good. And then Tanner Houck, he's out of sight, out of mind because they have Kenley and they don't have a spot for him in the rotation. I just think he's a really good pitcher and will provide value in some form over the next 2 years. So those are my 3. But who's your reliever to target?
I don't like targeting relievers in Dynasty, and I don't like trading for them. I don't like using draft capital on them either. But I went.
Are you fab only?
I lean fab only. I have been guilty of taking like the Corey Kniebles or Alex Lang, like you're saying in FYPDs. If I'm in a win now kind of competitive year, I have done that. I often regret it, but yeah, I don't want to invest in relief pitchers. But if you got Class A or if you've got like Edwin Diaz, it's just money, and you don't have to think about it for years. So I went off book, I guess. I went with Ben Joyce of the Angels. I'm sure most of your listeners have seen like the 102 mile an hour fastballs on Twitter, and his slider is like excellent as well by Stuff Plus. So he's got two great pitches. Angels don't have a closer right now. If you look at Zip's projections, how they do like the 3-year window, Dan Zaborski has him in 2025 with a 115 whip and a 335 ERA at age 24. So if you're doing that, like that's you're going to be the closer probably, the Angels. Just the whip is just so good, and that's at age 24. So he'll even better by 27. So like the way we kind of like Andres Munoz or these young guys, Yoan Duran, I think Ben Joyce could be that. Will I invest in Ben Joyce? Would I trade for Ben Joyce? Not as a primary target. I would ask for him to be thrown in if he's on a team right now, or pick him in FYPD later. But I just think he's probably going to be worth more in 3 years than we're drafting him or trading for him now, with the way we're valuing him now.
I love that call. Ben Joyce is going to be in a kind of a research article project I'm working on right now. Will feature Ben Joyce along with many other pitchers, but keep an eye out for that. Probably next week sometime. That's honestly, that's what the people come here for. They want the Ben Joyce. They want the next Andres Munoz. So that's a better name to throw out than my big leaguers who you'd actually have to give something up for in a trade. Is Ben Joyce rostered in your leagues?
I don't think so. I think he's available in all of them. Yeah.
So you wouldn't? Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's someone. I definitely don't think he's someone you should have to trade for in the vast majority of dynasty leagues. Do you recall like kind of any big hits on relievers in your dynasty leagues, like guys that you keep for a while that you've gotten off fab?
Not me personally. I wanted to get Edwin Diaz when he was on Seattle, and Andrew McQuiston in my league. Shout out to him. Grabbed him like that week I was considering it. So he obviously that's hit, and he's been on his huge hit. We had Seranthony Dominguez, and then I dropped him when he got his Tommy John, I think it was. I have him again, and there's a chance he could be valuable. But there aren't really these long-term relievers that last a while. Like it's very difficult.
One of the biggest. I don't even know if it was. I still don't think it was bad process necessarily. But I dropped Emmanuel Clase in a bunch of dynasty leagues when he got that suspension. And still think that was the right thing to do. But I definitely regret that. I mean, if you have an Emmanuel Clase or Edwin Diaz in Dynasty who you just didn't give up anything for, in all likelihood, if you picked them up, it's just such a massive win. All right, so Dylan's been really generous with his time. Going to get you out of here in a second, but first we're going to do round 21 NFBC Draft Champions ADP. Dylan and I will both go through and pick one player with a round 21 Draft Champions ADP that we're buying and one that we are fading at that price. and I will list off the players who we'll be choosing from. Sean Manaea, Garrett Mitchell, Brendan Donovan, Dylan Carlson, Ross Stripling, Taylor Rogers, Taiwan Walker, Masataka Yoshida, Juan Yepez, Martin Perez, Oswaldo Cabrera, Hayden Wesneski, Jose Siri, Bo Naylor, and Cal Quantrill. So, Dylan, who are you buying from these round 21 guys?
So I went with Dylan Carlson. I have a soft spot for Dylan Carlson. I have him in a bunch of leagues. I took him in the Clegg mock. I took him in the BA mock. One thing I've incorporated into my redraft prep this year is sort of the 80%, 20% tile, somehow incorporating that into the projection. And he has a chance, obviously, of breaking out, higher chance of breaking out than collapsing. So I have him as the guy I would want out of this group.
How do you see that outfield shaking out in the first couple months? Like, who do you think's the odd man out?
I kind of think they'll all play equally. So, I mean, Tyler O'Neill may get injured.
He's doing yoga now. How could he get injured?
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So he won't get injured. I just think they're gonna try to kind of have it. Yeah, I don't think one person is gonna be like benched and only play, once every 4 games. I think they're gonna have a kind of equal opportunity, which maybe is bad for all of them. This appeal to authority that you mentioned before, like the fact that they didn't really want to trade him for Soto, like that is a boost of confidence to me. And I've always liked Carlson. I like everything about him. And he's one of these guys that are just solid, 20 home runs, 10 stolen bases, kind of the expectation, reasonably good BA, reasonably good OBP. He's still young and on a good team, will be in a good lineup. Maybe he won't hit as high in the lineup, but I just think that like over the next few years, he'll be good. So I know we're talking redraft here, but I just think he has has a chance to kind of break out in quotes this year.
Do you think the breakout kind of looks like a sort of like a good Andrew Benintendi season, that type of thing?
I'm hoping better than that, but yeah, I don't know, like 25 home runs and all the stuff about he can't barrel, he has terrible contact quality. Everyone forgets about that because he hit 25 home runs, and the Cardinals are having a good season, so he's kind of in the public consciousness. That's the type of thing I expect or hope for, I guess. That would
be quite a breakout. 25 homers from Carlson. I'll be honest, I haven't really even considered 25 homers as a possibility for him, just based on like what you said, like how the barrel rate, the hard hit rate. But you think it's in there?
Well, I think before last year, we thought he could hit 20 home runs, I think. And you can't throw out last year, but like, it's not that he's become a totally different person than we thought, maybe. And so I think if we thought he could be 20 home runs before, he probably could be 20 home runs again. And so breakout's 25. That's my logic.
Nice. All right. I'm going to go from the same team there. And I'm not really looking for a breakout, but this is Draft Champions ADP. And I think Brendan Donovan is a fantastic guy to get in Draft Champions draft and hold format. He has the perfect middle corner outfield eligibility going on. He had the 12th lowest O swing in the majors as a rookie. I think he, at the very least, hits in a good spot against righties, and he could play every day due to his ability to kind of move around. So I like Donovan there. Any thoughts on him, or should we move on to?
I like him. I had him at TGFBI last year, so I was like every day seeing him. They were definitely picking him over Gorman. I've traded for him in a league, Dynasty league. I picked him in the 2 mocks as well. So nice. Like he's he's kind of like a Luis Arias type of guy, high batting average-ish, high OBP for sure. Not much in power and speed, but a good contributor, an undervalued contributor, I think.
Yeah, I think Arias is definitely sort of the idea there. All right, my fade here is Martin Perez. You know, in his breakout year, like the big year that came out of nowhere that was awesome, he had a 1.26 WHIP, and every projection system has him for at least a 1.33 WHIP this year. Maybe he's just better and they don't realize that, and he's going to have another whip in the mid twos, 1.2s, but I don't like taking an old pitcher that is a good bet to have a whip over 1.3. So that's my pick. Who's your guy?
Yeah, same kind of idea. Taijuan Walker, a whip over 130. He's on the Phillies now, right? So the defense is going to be worse.
Yep.
And when if you're getting innings and you have a high whip, it's just bad on your team. Like it's hard to overcome. So I don't like the volume plays where you're getting crushed in the ERA or whip, obviously. But I just think that they're way worse. It has a bigger effect on your team than people think.
Yes.
Like if you always look at the end of season, like the dollar values earned, it's like the $0 to $2 guys are like the middle relievers, and you're all negative for like the German Marquez and all those guys. So I always avoid them. So it was between Perez, Walker, even Quantrill for me. He always outperforms his peripherals, Quantrill. And maybe I'm a sucker for thinking that one day it's gonna go the other way, but then like people like Kyle Hendricks or whatever keep confounding me. So yeah, it's like one of those pitchers. I just those are the guys I don't like. A lot of innings and bad peripherals, expected peripherals.
Yep, we're in full agreement there. All right, Dylan, I'm going to be seeing you tonight. For the BA pod with Jeff and Carlos and I'm sure some other people, but anything you want to plug before we let you go?
The BA Fantasy Summit, first annual BA Fantasy Summit, February 25th. You're obviously a contributor there. Great panelists, the who's who basically of panelists. Saturday, the February 25th. So I think if you're anybody in the fantasy realm, you should tune in and see some great insights.
Yes, the Baseball America Fantasy Summit. I can't wait. Thanks so much for joining me, Dylan. This has been the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast brought to you by Underdog Fantasy and Fantrax. And I'll be back with another episode next Wednesday.
Cheers.